A cop mocked a teenager in court, thinking she was just a law student. He had no idea she was the attorney about to end his career. Nobody in that courtroom took her seriously the moment she walked in. Not the bailiff, not the gallery, definitely not the cop at the witness stand, already leaning back like this was just another boring shift in a long week. But Zariah Benton didn't care. She pushed the heavy courtroom door open at exactly 8:57 a.m., her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. She wasn't late. She was timed. 3 minutes early, just enough to walk in without rushing and still make a statement. Black Converse, charcoal slacks from a resale app, a faded navy blazer with sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her box braids were pulled back into a low bun, neat but casual. No makeup, no jewelry, no attempt to look older than her 19 years. She carried a thick binder under one arm, no laptop, no flashy briefcase. "Court's in session," the bailiff called. Judge Lennox, silver-bearded and old school, sat up straighter on the bench as Zariah passed the bar. She took her seat at the defense table without saying a word, unfolded her binder, flipped to a tab labeled Kilroy, Cross. The other attorney glanced over, confused. Ma'am, this table's for counsel." "I am counsel," she replied without looking up. A pause. You're the one handling the cross today?" Zariah looked up for the first time, calm eyes, no attitude, just facts. "Yes." He looked her over again, not sure whether to laugh or be worried. Before he could respond, a voice from the witness stand broke the silence. "This some kind of student court program?" That came from Officer Dennis Kilroy, white, mid-40s, arms crossed, the kind of guy who wore mirrored sunglasses on cloudy days. He chuckled, turned to the court officer beside him, and whispered, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "What is this, debate club?" A few scattered laughs from the benches. Zariah didn't blink. She clicked her pen once, wrote a single note in her binder, and waited. "Let's proceed," Judge Lennox said, clearly unsure whether this was a prank or some kind of legal TikTok stunt. But Zariah stood. Her voice didn't waver. It didn't try to sound deep or older than it was. "Your Honor," she said, "defense is ready to proceed with cross-examination." A few eyebrows rose. Kilroy leaned back again, but this time he narrowed his eyes. Like maybe this girl might have something up her sleeve. Zariah walked toward the witness stand, not rushed, not stiff, just steady, like she'd done it 100 times, even if this was only her third time doing it in open court. "Officer Kilroy," she said, "you've been on the force." "How long?" He smirked. 23 years. "Great," she said, flipping through her notes. "That means you're familiar with standard protocol during routine traffic stops, correct?" He raised an eyebrow. "Obviously." "Good, because I'd like to walk through one, specifically the one involving my client on April 6th. The courtroom shifted. People sat up. Kilroy rolled his neck like he was stretching for a workout. "You mean the guy who ran a stop sign and got mouthy?" Zariah nodded. "Yes, the man you pulled over at 4:17 p.m. near Parker Road, who you said, quote, was acting twitchy and argumentative. That one." Kilroy smiled again, this time smug. "Yep, that's the one." Zariah stopped, looked him dead in the eye. "Did you have your body camera activated during that stop?" "Of course." "Was the footage submitted to the case file?" "Yeah." Zariah turned to Judge Lennox. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'll be referencing the officer's own footage in my line of questioning." The judge gave a slow nod. "Proceed." Kilroy shifted again, but not because of discomfort. Not yet. He just thought this would be over quick. But something in the way Zariah flipped the next page in her binder made the entire room lean in. And Officer Kilroy was about to realize he wasn't the sharpest person in the room anymore. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it felt like it. People started tuning in, not out. Phones were away. Even the defense co-counsel leaned back and crossed his arms like he was watching a movie he didn't expect to be good. Zariah stood at the podium, flipping through her notes, not to waste time, but because timing mattered. "Officer Kilroy," she said, "you stated in your report that the driver failed to stop at a stop sign. Do you recall writing that?" "Yep." "And the stop sign in question is at the corner of Parker and Bunker Hill?" "Yeah." "You mentioned you were parked facing east on Parker Road when you noticed the alleged violation." That's right. Zariah nodded, scribbling briefly, then turned a page. Do you also remember stating that the intersection was clear when you initiated the stop? No obstructions, clear daylight conditions, low traffic? Correct. She stepped to the side, holding up a printout. This is a still from your own body cam footage, timestamped at 4:16:49 p.m. It shows your car facing east with two SUVs partially blocking the stop sign on Bunker Hill. Can you confirm? Kilroy leaned forward. Yeah, maybe two cars were there. Not maybe, Zariah replied. They were, and at that angle, could you clearly see whether my client came to a full stop? He hesitated. I judged it the best I could. Not what I asked. Could you clearly see it? Not completely, no. Zariah glanced at the judge. Noted. She turned back. Let's move to the body cam audio. Around the 112 mark, your words were, quote, he's twitchy, probably high. Is that correct? Yes. Did you conduct any field sobriety tests? No. Did you perform a drug screening or request one? No. Zariah's voice didn't rise. She didn't look surprised. So on what basis did you determine he was probably high? Kilroy shrugged. He was fidgeting, looking around. Did he ever raise his voice? No. Threaten you? No. Refuse to show ID? No. Zariah paused. Let the silence drag. So your conclusion was based solely on him fidgeting. Kilroy started to shift in his seat. Look, I've done this a long time, and my client was stopped, searched, and cited. Based on your feeling? The courtroom stayed quiet. Kilroy's mouth opened, but no words came out fast enough. Zariah continued. Your report also said you observed a bag under the passenger seat and suspected contraband. Correct. But the footage shows you asking, what's in the bag, without ever pointing a flashlight or crouching down. How did you observe it? I saw something dark under there. A shadow? I assumed it was a bag. But you wrote that you observed a bag. Maybe I was mistaken. Zariah let that hang in the air. Maybe you were. She walked slowly back to the table, calm, unbothered, like she was taking her time because she could. The prosecutor shuffled papers, but no one was listening to him now. Zariah turned again. Officer Kilroy, in your 23 years on the force, have you ever been formally disciplined for misconduct? The room tensed. His jaw moved, but again, too slow. Yes, once, 10 years ago. What for? He looked to the prosecutor for help. The judge spoke before either could move. Answer the question, officer. Kilroy let out a breath. Excessive force complaint. It was dropped. Thank you, Zariah said, voice still even. She glanced down at her binder, then up at the gallery. The energy in the room was shifting. People leaned in like they didn't want to miss what came next. But what no one expected was how she'd use Kilroy's own report to show he hadn't just exaggerated. He had broken departmental policy, and he did it all on tape. Officer Kilroy wasn't smiling anymore. His arms were still crossed, but tighter now, jaw clenched. His right knee bounced under the witness stand, a little twitch that gave him away. For the first time, he didn't look like a man in control of the room. Zariah stayed steady. She walked back to the center of the courtroom like she was giving a lecture. No rush, no flash, just facts. I'd like to read a section from the Plano PD Procedural Manual, revised January last year, she said, holding up a printed packet. Section 5.3, Suspicion-Based Stops. She cleared her throat. All stops based on observed behavior must be clearly articulated and supported by specific actions observed by the officer at the scene. Subjective feelings or instincts are not grounds for initiating a search. She lowered the packet and locked eyes with Kilroy. You wrote that my client was fidgeting, glancing around, and looked nervous, correct? Correct. None of those are illegal behaviors? No. And you did not observe a weapon, contraband, or direct threat before initiating the search? No. She flipped another page. Yet in the body cam footage at 4:19:08 p.m., you said, quote, he fits the type. Always act the same way when they've got something to hide. The courtroom didn't breathe for a moment. Fits the type, Zariah repeated, more slowly this time. That's what you said. Kilroy shifted again. You meant what? I meant guys who get nervous during stops. You sure that's all you meant? She asked, still calm. Because just a few seconds later, you said, just like the last kid, jumped like a rabbit when I reached for my belt. Kilroy said nothing. Zariah looked to the judge. Your Honor, we're establishing a pattern here. One not supported by department guidelines, but by profiling, assumption, and a clear violation of policy 5.3. The judge nodded slowly. Continue. Zariah turned back. Officer Kilroy, are you familiar with case number J204 from 6 months ago? Same precinct? He frowned. Refresh my memory. You stopped another young black man. Similar neighborhood, similar phrasing in your report. Twitchy, glanced around. Looked like he had something to hide. She held up 2 documents. The language is nearly identical. He didn't respond. Did you detain that young man? Yes. Was anything illegal found? No. Was a complaint filed? Yes, but was it dropped? No. The room got real still again. Zariah looked down at her notes, then up. Is it standard for you to repeat descriptions across different incidents when the behavior isn't illegal and no violation has occurred? I don't know, he mumbled. Zariah stepped back. You don't know? Kilroy took a breath. Maybe I rely on pattern recognition. Zariah tilted her head. That's not what the department calls it. He raised his voice now just a bit. Look, sometimes you get a feel for who's hiding something. There it was. She waited for the air to settle. I believe we covered this, officer, she said plainly. Your department policy doesn't accept feelings as a reason for a search. He said nothing. Zariah turned and addressed the judge. Your Honor, it's clear the stop lacked legal grounds. The officer not only misrepresented his line of sight, but also used subjective language with no supporting behavior. This isn't about being a veteran on the force. It's about accountability. Judge Lennox nodded, but his expression gave away nothing. Zariah returned to the defense table and sat down. No one clapped. No one had to. The silence said everything. Kilroy stared at her now. No more smirks. No more side comments. Just the realization that she'd walked him into every trap, using nothing but his own words, policy, and footage. But the part that shook the courtroom wasn't the contradictions. It was what Zariah did next with just one question, and how that single sentence rewrote the case. Zariah didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't even stand back up. She just sat there, flipping through one last page in her binder, then asked the question that froze the entire courtroom. Officer Kilroy, did you know my client is a high school math teacher at Booker Middle? His head jerked back slightly. No. You didn't ask? No. Did you ask him where he was coming from or going to? No, didn't seem relevant. Zariah let that sit for a second. So, to be clear, the stop, the search, and the citation were all based on a rolling stop you couldn't clearly see, a bag you didn't identify, and a twitch you assumed meant he was hiding something, all without asking him a single question about where he was coming from or who he was. Kilroy shifted. That's not exactly. But it is, she cut in, gently but firmly. You saw a young black man in a hoodie driving a used Camry and decided the story for him. He said nothing. You didn't ask. You didn't wonder. You didn't think. Maybe this guy had a long day teaching 6th graders how to convert fractions. You thought, he fits the type, and that was all you needed. She turned to the judge again. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for truth. This case isn't about a stop sign. It's about assumptions. Lazy ones. Harmful ones. The judge didn't respond. He didn't have to. Zariah stood up, finally, and addressed the gallery. Every inch of this courtroom runs on rules, legal procedure, evidence, discipline. So how is it that a man in uniform can toss that all aside because of a feeling and expect the rest of us not to notice? No one said a word. She turned to Officer Kilroy one last time. You've been doing this job 23 years, but what scares me most is how confident you were that no one would question the way you wrote that report. How certain you were that no one would hold you to your own department's standards. The judge cleared his throat. Ms. Benton, you've made your point. She gave a short nod. No further questions, Your Honor. Kilroy stared ahead. His hands were gripping the edge of the stand now. There was no smirk, no chuckle, just quiet. Zariah returned to her seat. Her co-counsel leaned toward her, whispered, "That was lethal." She didn't smile. Instead, she whispered back, "It was overdue." Behind them, in the gallery, someone let out a low whistle. The prosecutor asked to redirect, but barely managed a few questions before the judge waved it off. "Move to closing arguments," Judge Lennox said. His tone was flat, but his eyes said everything. But while the court prepared to wrap, the energy in that room had already shifted. Because everyone knew Zariah hadn't just dismantled a case, she exposed a system, quietly, cleanly, completely. Closing arguments were supposed to be the dramatic part, but Zariah had already done the damage, not with speeches, not with outrage, but with evidence. Her closing wasn't about fireworks. It was about focus. She stood slowly, took a sip of water, and looked directly at the jury. "When you watched that body cam footage," she said, "you didn't see a threat. You saw a teacher driving home. You saw a man cooperate. You saw no search warrant, no probable cause. You saw words that were meant to sound professional, but fell apart under pressure." She let that land. "Now let's talk about what you didn't see," she added. "You didn't see a man resisting. You didn't see a traffic violation. You didn't see any sign of criminal behavior. All you saw, and all Officer Kilroy needed, was a feeling." Zariah paused, then walked slowly toward the jury box. "Feelings aren't evidence." She looked toward Officer Kilroy, then back at the jury. "Feelings don't give you permission to rewrite facts. They don't justify skipping questions, skipping protocol, or skipping basic respect." She turned toward the judge briefly, then to the gallery. "My client was profiled, humiliated, and cited because someone didn't bother to ask who he was before deciding what he was." Another beat. "And the most disturbing part? If we weren't here today, if we didn't have footage, policy, records, and this platform, none of this would matter. It would just be another closed file with a fine and no explanation." She walked back to her table. "This case isn't about winning. It's about telling the truth and making sure someone finally listens to it." She sat down. The prosecutor followed. His closing was brief, dry. Nothing landed. The words fell into the air and disappeared before they reached the jury. Zariah didn't even look at him. Her client, Mr. Devin Riles, turned to her, whispered, "You think we've got a shot?" Zariah looked him in the eye. "They heard you," she said. "That's more than most people get." The jury didn't take long. 70 minutes after deliberation began, they returned. The foreperson stood. "We find the defendant not guilty of all charges." A wave passed through the room. Some people gasped. Others sat stunned. Kilroy didn't move. He stared forward like the moment hadn't fully landed yet. The judge spoke again. "Charges are dismissed. Court is adjourned." Zariah shook Devin's hand, then his shoulder. He just stood there, blinking. "Thank you," he said, voice cracking. "I thought this was going to bury me." Zariah smiled for the first time that day. "You're standing. That means they lost." She packed her binder slowly. No rush, no victory dance, just a deep breath and a quiet moment. People were already whispering as she walked down the aisle, about her age, her delivery, her calm. Nobody was making jokes anymore, not even Kilroy. He stood in the back of the courtroom, hands on his hips, watching her leave like he wasn't sure if he should be mad or relieved. Zariah pushed open the heavy courtroom door and walked into the sun. Outside, a small crowd of local reporters waited. One of them stepped forward. "Ms. Benton, Zariah, how does it feel to win a case like this at your age?" Zariah didn't even pause. "I'm not here to feel good," she said. "I'm here to make things right." The reporter stammered, trying to come up with a better question. Zariah kept walking, but what she didn't know yet was that the clip of her closing argument had already hit social media, and by sunset, the entire country would know her name. By 6:42 p.m., the clip had passed 280,000 views on Twitter. Someone in the gallery had recorded Zariah's closing argument. The caption was simple. "She's 19. He's been a cop for 23 years. Guess who came prepared?" The replies flooded in. "I've never seen someone undress a case like that without raising their voice. This is what real courtroom power looks like. Who is she? We need her running for DA in 10 years. At a cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse, Zariah sat across from Devin Riles, who was still holding his untouched coffee. His hands hadn't stopped shaking, not because he was scared, but because the adrenaline hadn't fully left his body. "I thought they were going to find some way to spin it," he said. "I've never seen anyone handle cops like that, not even older lawyers." Zariah stirred her tea slowly. "It's not about handling them. It's about cornering them with their own words." Devin laughed, more from relief than humor. "You've done this before?" "Only twice in person," she said. "Rest were pro bono consults, Zoom stuff." He blinked. "That's crazy." She shrugged. "I read fast." Just then, her phone buzzed again. More notifications. Her name was now trending in Texas. Someone had posted a stitched clip comparing her to the prosecutor side by side, one sounding like a robot, the other like a razor blade. She silenced her phone. "I don't care about going viral," she said quietly. "I care about what happens next." Devin leaned back. "What does happen next?" Zariah looked him dead in the eye. "Nothing, and that's the problem. That officer goes back to work. The department says it was a misunderstanding. People move on, until the next one." Devin nodded slowly. "So why keep doing it?" Zariah sat forward. "Because every time I win one of these, it gets harder for the next cop to lie, and easier for the next person to fight back." Outside, more cameras were starting to gather. The courthouse press team had already requested a quote from her. She declined. She had nothing more to say, at least not to them. That night, her email inbox filled with requests, podcasts, news interviews, school boards asking her to speak. But Zariah didn't respond right away. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted people to do their jobs right and stop expecting her to fix what they kept breaking. Across town, Officer Kilroy sat at a bar in silence, watching the clip of himself on someone else's phone screen. "Didn't she burn you up in court today?" the bartender asked, half laughing. Kilroy didn't answer. He just finished his drink and left a tip. The next morning, the Plano Police Department issued a statement. "We take all public concerns seriously and will be conducting a formal review of the incident involving Officer Kilroy. We remain committed to community accountability and professional conduct." Zariah read the statement on her phone while sitting in her room. She shook her head and muttered, "Cut and paste." Her mom peeked through the doorway. "You good?" she asked. Zariah smiled. "Yeah, just thinking." "You're all over the news," her mom said, proud and protective at the same time. "I saw your clip on Facebook. Even Aunt Rochelle's group chat is going wild." Zariah laughed a little. "It's a weird day." Her mom leaned against the doorframe. "You want dinner? Maybe later." Alone again, Zariah opened her binder and turned to a blank page. She titled it, "Future Cases, What We Missed Today." But the truth was, even as she tried to move on, something had changed. Not just in the courtroom, but in the eyes of every person who once doubted whether she belonged there in the first place. Monday morning came fast. The courthouse buzzed early. Not with drama, but with attention. People wanted to see her. The girl in the oversized blazer and sneakers who wiped the floor with a 23-year cop like she'd done it 100 times. But Zariah wasn't there. She was back at her apartment near the University of Texas at Dallas, sitting on her small gray couch, eating cereal out of a mug and flipping through her handwritten notes. No music, no TV, just the sound of her spoon tapping the ceramic. Her phone vibrated again. Another text. This one read, "Saw the vid. That was fire. I owe you one." It was from a guy she helped 2 months ago, wrongfully arrested for fitting the description. The case never made it to trial, but Zariah tore through the report and got it dismissed in less than a week. She never asked for thanks, just the facts. Her inbox had 187 unread messages, some reporters, some clients, some high school girls who said she gave them hope. She opened one. It was from a woman in Amarillo, a mother. "My daughter wants to go to law school now. She watched your closing 5 times. She said, 'I didn't know we were allowed to talk like that in court.' Thank you." Zariah closed the email and sat still for a minute. It wasn't about praise. It never was. But she knew what that feeling was. Watching someone who looks like you do something you were told wasn't for you. She picked up her phone, finally replying to a reporter who'd asked her what it felt like to win. She typed, It doesn't feel like a win until the system stops giving officers like Kilroy the benefit of the doubt and starts giving people like Devon the benefit of the truth. Then she hit send. Across town, at the department headquarters, Officer Kilroy's body cam footage was under official review. It wasn't just about one case anymore. It was his language, his patterns, his record. Suddenly, all the things he thought no one would ever care about were being analyzed line by line. By Friday, he was placed on administrative leave. No press conference, no applause, just a quiet exit. Meanwhile, Zariah sat in a classroom of high school juniors at a youth legal program in Arlington, leading a workshop called What They Can't Teach You in Law School. She wore a t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of clean white sneakers. "You're going to walk into rooms where people think you don't belong," she told them. "Don't waste time proving them wrong. Prove yourself right." One student raised her hand. "How do you stay calm when they laugh at you?" Zariah smiled. "Because they laugh when they feel safe. I don't give them that." The class went quiet. Then one boy whispered, "That's cold." Zariah grinned. "It's justice. It's just dressed different." Later that night, back at home, she took a moment to breathe. She looked out the window, lights flickering across campus buildings. She didn't want fame. She wanted change. But if people were going to keep watching, she'd give them something real to watch. No theatrics, no sound bites, just truth. And one hard rule she'd already written in permanent ink: never underestimate the one person in the room with something to prove and nothing to lose. Sometimes the people who laugh at you are just scared of what you already know. You don't need to shout. You just need to show up prepared and let the truth do the rest. If this story made you feel something, share it, speak it, challenge what's normal. Because silence never changed anything. But courage backed by knowledge, that's where justice starts.